Oh, glad you're here. Happy Monday. This is going to be a great time with our guests we have this evening. And I had him on here once before and ran into some technical issues, and we were able to make some adjustments since then. And I appreciate him pointing some things out on me because it opened up a whole new world for me. So it's going to be a great conversation. This guy's an incredible storyteller. He's got a lot of great nuggets to offer. So I encourage you to get a pen and paper as we have this conversation, because he's certainly going to give you some nuggets that you can take away that can make a big impact in your business and in your life. But my guest, who I want to introduce you to, is Ben Gay III. And this guy has been doing, I just actually was corrected on this, his bio says he's been doing commission sales since he was 14 years old, but it was actually sooner than that. He mentioned that he'd been doing fundraisers with Krispy Kreme donuts. And this guy he's got quite a biography. He's was a founder and is a current executive director of the National Association of Professional Salesmen. He's authored 12 books on the subject of selling and living successful, and I have about 5 of them here that I'll talk about later. He writes 2 newsletters, the Closer's Update and the Closer's Alert. They've been called the Voices of Professional Selling. He's created and taught famous people-building programs for the inmates and staffs at the client's infamous San Quentin State Prison. This guy's an incredible human being. He's contributed a lot to the business industry and more specifically the sales industry. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Good to be back with you.
Yeah, it was a great conversation we had last time, and I would like to talk about some of the things that we discussed last time. And you know, you had incredible stories to share, and I don't know if you remember. I'm sure you do remember. I was having an interview with my phone because I couldn't figure out how to get online. So it's great to have you back. You know, Ben, and I'm looking at, so here's some of his books that he has. He sent me these after we got off the show, and I ended up getting all these. He's got these books on the Closer 1 and the Closer 2. And, you know, one thing that I'm intrigued by of doing this, you know, I've been in sales myself probably 30 years, been in it, doing it a while. And the thing that always intrigues me is how people perceive salespeople. You know, I've asked people this question lots of times of what do you think about when you think of a salesperson? And probably 99% of them say a car salesman. And so knowing that, and I'm sure you can relate to some of this, what is it about sales that you just absolutely love to the point of, I mean, you've been doing it 50 some years.
I like talking to people and meeting people. And so I'm not much different in a restaurant with the server. I've recently discovered they don't like to be called waitresses and waiters anymore. With the server, as somebody I'm selling $1 million package to, I just love people. Right. Selling is a place where you can meet person after person after person, whether it's on phone or the internet or whatever. And I love the use of words. I'm a Southerner, so you don't want to ask me. You don't ask me a yes or no question. I don't know how to do those. So if you like talking and like communicating, and I love people, so selling was just sort of a natural for me. That. And I'm not trained to do anything else. The day I got into high commission selling, September 15th, 1965, I looked through the want ads, first and only time I've ever done it. And I guess I started with the A's. That was probably accountant or something. And rather quickly, I was deep into the alphabet because there wasn't anything I could do. I've been selling all my life up to that point. And so I finally got down. I guess I went through all of the help wanted and got into business opportunities. I wasn't sure what that was, but I knew there wasn't any. Where I was looking for philosopher in the want ads, rather quickly I was in the plumber section. No one wanted a philosopher. If they did, they didn't want to pay for them. So I got into business opportunities and saw, if you know anything about marketing plans, want to make more money, dial this number. Well, I was looking in the want ads because I wanted to make more money. I mean, that was the reason I was there. Right. So again, I didn't set out for a sales job, but since it was all that I knew and all I've been doing since I was a little kid, sort of was a natural. I've never really considered anything else. I've never sat around. When I was attitude coach for the astronauts in Apollo 15, 16, 17, they said, well, what would you else have liked to have done? I said, well, it's exciting. You guys get Corvettes from the local dealership and you drive around and, everything but the silk scarf flying about. That appeals to me, but I don't have a college education. I'm not a pilot, wasn't then anyway. So I don't qualify to, maybe I'd like to be an astronaut, but I don't qualify. So that drove me right back to selling.
Huh. Interesting. So you said that, I had another guest on a couple weeks back, and he said something, and I'd never heard about this about sales before. He says that the word sell actually comes from a Latin word that means to serve.
I didn't know that.
And what you're talking about, you love talking with people, you love helping them and serving them and stuff like that. It just makes more and more sense because there's so many people that have given the industry such a bad name because they're selling stuff that shouldn't be sold or convincing people to do things against their own will. And I had one of my old business partners that used to tell me this all the time. And it really has resonated with me from the point that he told me on to now. And that was probably 15 years ago. But he said, if you convince somebody against their will, they will be of the same opinion still. And, to say that I can sell Eskimos ice, why would I want to do that, right? Because they don't need it, right?
I could, but why?
Exactly, right, exactly. So and one thing that I've been thinking about during this, this conversation that we're going to have tonight, and I was driving down the road, and I thought about it, is what do you think is probably the biggest obstacle for salespeople to overcome that really takes their career from average to extraordinary? What is that biggest obstacle that you think salespeople struggle with?
Fear is one. Fear of a new venture, fear of going out. And when we talk salespeople, let's just for the ease of this conversation, say that we're talking about people who are either 100% commission or mostly commission. So that crowd, when you say to somebody, give up a regular paycheck and go off on your own, because commission salespeople are in business for themselves. One of the first things I tell people in the seminar to do is get out that legal pad you didn't think you were going to use and write at the top, me incorporated, me, because you are a company. You may have a small payroll, you, your spouse, and your children, but you're a company, and you have to support them, and you have to make a profit, and so on. So, I think fear is the number one thing. Probably fear of the unknown. Fear, like fear of public speaking is supposedly the number one psychological fear in the world, ahead of death by fire, which is interesting. So that's got to be one. In overcoming inertia, doing something. And in my case, it was lack of discipline in the beginning. The first 6 months, I had an opportunity to make a lot of money. Zig and I joined the same business on the same day in the same meeting. He answered the same ad I did. Zig took off pretty quick. I didn't, because I thought, having never sold anything was particularly challenging. I mean, selling lawn mowing services or calling on stores, selling things when I was a manufacturer's rep. They were in the business of that type of merchandise. So it wasn't difficult to sell cookware to a housewares buyer if you had a good line of product. We're just talking about how much. So now I'm going to have to talk to people about something they've never thought of before in their life, going into business for themselves in an MLM, multi-level marketing company, which Holiday Magic Cosmetics was. And that required some selling. Fortunately, it had been done before I got there. They already wrote down what you should say. I improved it later when I became president of the company, but it was already written down what you needed to say and so on. But I didn't learn it. And 6 months into the program, I hadn't made a penny. Not a penny had changed hands. My mother and sister didn't even buy a tube of lipstick. Maybe I didn't ask them. I don't recall. I don't think they would have refused me. But not a penny had changed hands. I walked in the meeting room one night, and Bill Dempsey, who had recruited Zig and me and my buddy and running
Bill
buddy and partner.
That's amazing.
James H. Riker Jr. stopped me and he said, I don't want you coming to the meetings anymore. And make a long story somewhat shorter, he said, you're depressing people. You won't learn the script, so you never bring anybody with you. People see you here all the time. They assume you're doing well, so they ask you to help with their prospects. You don't know what to say to them because you haven't learned those scripts. And you know help from the front of the room because you haven't learned the opportunity meeting script. So you're really sort of a drag on the organization. I just don't want you to come back anymore. And I said, well, that's not one of my options in life. By that time, we started with $91.42. By that time, I had $5,000 in, which was in 1965 dollars. That's about 50,000, and that was $5,000 exactly more than I had. I owed every penny of that to somebody else. So I said, how do I get back on board? He said, learn the scripts. And when you can stand in front of my desk and show me verbatim how you recruit somebody, what you say to them after the meeting's over, and give the meeting 47 minutes word for word, I'll let you come back. So I did. Long story short, in the rest of that year, the other 6 months, we made $101,000 part-time. Today's money, that's over $1 million part-time. And the difference was Bill Dempsey forced me to get discipline, to learn the product, to learn the scripts, to do this, to do that, and so on. And then he was on me every day, minute by minute. When I walked in the room, Bill might be socializing, but when I walked in the room, I'd see his head turn and he would count the people I had with me. Lips moving, 1, 2, 3, so on. So that's part of it. And then people sell. They don't think about what they're selling. 85, I say it's one of those figures you make up, but I've made it up based on, I've been at this a while and I think it's about right. 85% of all the problems in selling go away if you sell a quality product or service that's competitively priced, doesn't have to be the cheapest, and you spend your days talking to qualified people. That's it. Right. The other 15% is become a person of class, quality, and substance, and be a good communicator, whether it's scripting or whatever. And about 5% of it is know your product. There are I'm told, about 7,500 parts on a new car. 7,500 parts. Wow. The average customer wants to know about 3 of them. Where's the accelerator? Where's the brake? And where do I put the key in? Right. And as I telling the salesperson who sells me a car, and the 4th thing I want is your home, your personal cell phone number, because when one of those 3 doesn't work, I'm going to call you, and you're going to come fix it. I'll call you before I call AAA. Right. So, so a whole bunch of things like that, and then they don't know how they're going to encounter certain objections. If you've been in selling over 30 days, selling a given product or service, 30 days or more, you've heard every objection about that product or service you're ever going to hear. Every one. You might even hear them the first week. If that's true, why wouldn't you have answers ready or know how to bat those down? J. Douglas Edwards in Sales Closing Power, one of the books you just held up, said if you have a built-in objection, bring it up first and brag about it. But they don't have the courage to bring it up first and brag about it. They don't have the courage to overcome you were kind when you said that they think you're an automobile salesman. Because I know plenty of those that are wonderful people, but the image of the industry is horrible. And if you said to most people under sodium pentothal, when I say the word salesperson to you, what do you think of? Liar, cheat, and thief. That's what they think of. Right. Now, if everybody you approach virtually thinks you're a liar, cheat, and a thief, and your products are overpriced, and you're this and you're that, you ought to be prepared for that. If you're not, shame on you. Right.
So you said that you were, if I'm making it correct on this, you were saying that you were in an MLM. Was that, you said it was makeup?
Yeah, the parent company, in fact, the only company when I joined was Holiday Magic Cosmetics. It was the largest MLM direct sales company in the world. It was about a year old when I joined it. So it was just starting to roll. And rather quickly, we were the largest MLM direct sales company combination in the world. And then we did spin-offs, Stay Power Motor Oil Additives, exact same marketing plan, exact same scripts, exact same opportunity meeting. Everything was the same. It was just the product was different. Mm-hmm. And then we had Bob Cummings Vitamins, the old actor. We hired him and built a product line around him. Same marketing plan and so on. So by the time I left, we had 5 major companies operating in each of 25 different countries. So I think that's about 125 companies, and I didn't know how to read a P&L, but I did know how to communicate and work hard and motivate other people and so on. So if you're in the right place at the right time, you become president. I literally was not qualified to do it. I know that. I knew it at the time, but I was surrounded with good people, and I knew how to make them do their jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you say makeup. I mean, and I've seen different MLM companies out there, Avon, Arbonne, different companies like that, where I don't think I've ever seen a male in those companies. So that right away, it's like, wow, I would have never thought that. So,
well, some of our biggest producers were ladies, but there was that stigma, not stigma, but the ladies will sell it, will recruit. And, but some of the ladies were fantastic recruiters also.
Right.
In opportunity meetings, one of the questions that would come up is, who's going to sell this stuff? You know, I'm a man. Who's going to sell this stuff? Right. Well, as the company grew, I encouraged our people all over the world to try and have meeting rooms that were split with movable dividers, you know, those accordion things.
Oh, right.
So when that question came up, because we were having cosmetic training right next door, I'd say, who's going to sell it? Really? Open that door. And they would slide open the door, and there'd be a couple of hundred ladies with various stages of makeup and cleansing cream and so on. They would wave. I said, that's who's going to sell it. But I sold quite a bit myself. Wow. I used to plan my day in a hotel to go down when they were doing makeup training, because if I walked in, the person would say, oh, Mr. Gay's with us, you know, and I go like I was surprised to be there. The reason I went there was to get my facial. They would put me up on stage and use me as a model. And I would act like, oh, this is silly and so on. I loved it. I got a complete facial once or twice a day for years.
Nice. Wow.
It was, I thought.
Wow. I've never had one.
Get one.
Quite an experience. So, and I know that, I want to talk about this a little bit later, but you mentioned in our last conversation that we had, you were really good friends with Napoleon Hill. And the reason I bring that up again is because for myself, and this has just been my own journey, plus me training and coaching out of other people, is in the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon talks about having a white hot burning desire, having that hunger that's just driving you. How do you fuel that within yourself and then motivate other people to have that hunger to drive them to step beyond what is comfortable? Because most people want to, the path of least resistance, right?
Sure.
And if you're going to have high achievement, you're going to have to go in where most people aren't willing to go, right? So how do you motivate yourself to have that white hot burning desire and motivate others to do the same?
For me, I enjoy attention. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm more comfortable in front of 10,000 people in an arena than I am at Thanksgiving dinner in the living room doing small talk with Gigi's relatives. They're my relatives too now, but I refer to them as Gigi's relatives. It's just where I'm comfortable in what I like to do. And that sort of comes along with it. My speaking ability and sales ability is what made me president of the company. So they had a contest, and the mystery prize was being president of the company. I didn't know that till I'd won it, but that's what it was. So I asked William Penn Patrick, who owned the company, I said, why was it a mystery prize? He said, in case somebody won it that I didn't like, in which case I would have changed it. We would have given away 2 Rolls Royces instead of 1 or whatever. Right. But so for me, it was frankly the attention. And then I was raised around money. My mother and father didn't give me any. When I left home, I probably had less than $5 on me. I left home in a pout. I was upset about something, so I ran away from home at 17 or something. A little old to be running away, but I did. ran away from home and with no money. But I had been raised at East Lake Country Club, Bobby Jones home course, Atlanta. Mm-hmm. 2 blocks down from my driveway was the gates of East Lake, and that's where I grew up and where most of my friends were. Well, in Atlanta, the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, Home Depot, et cetera, all the big companies have at least offices there, and all of their CEOs belong to East Lake. So I grew up around successful men and women and listening to their conversations and so on. So when I moved out on my own and realized that I was broke, and all of that went away. I didn't try and go to the club after I ran away, but I know if I had, my membership probably had been pulled or stamped or punched or whatever you do. So those days were over. So my comfort zone, Jim Newman, who ran PACE, was a good friend of mine, PACE seminars. Jim Newman, who's the one who came up with that term, comfort zone. My comfort zone, I didn't know I had one, but it had been set where I was used to nice things, nice people, nice cars, and I left home in a 51 Mercury in 65 or thereabouts. And so I looked around, it was sort of like, I don't belong here. It'd be like being in a foreign land where they don't speak your language. So I started scrambling to get back in my comfort zone. Now, on the downside, I'm inherently lazy. If I could make $1 million a year lying on my back watching news, I would. I'm a news junkie, and I have no desire to do physical labor. I did that for a while as a young person, discovered I didn't like it. So if you're lazy, but you have a high comfort zone, what you need is discipline. Tomorrow, when I come into the office, I will get out my handy dandy calendar. And right there is what I will be doing. I write it on the calendar as I'm supposed to do it. This interview is number 1 thing on the calendar for today, and highlighted in yellow so I don't miss it. And I just go down the list, and I've disciplined myself to you get it all done every day, no excuses. So I built structures and systems to protect me from me.
Makes sense.
Because in the little town of Placerville, they don't all laugh and cheer when I walk out the front door. They don't know who I am. Right. This is my little oasis. Here I'm known as Gigi Ronzoni's husband, and we don't know what he does. So I got to get my kick somewhere else, and it's following the program, doing the discipline.
So what about teaching someone to create that burning hot desire inside of them? To me, obviously, when we're hungry, we go into a grocery store, we make foolish decisions, right? And we're in that lower frequency, if you will, in that state of unresourcefulness, we make desperate decisions sometimes. And that's some of the experience that I've had with people in MLM. And I love MLM and network marketing. I mean, it's a great industry to get people started into this whole entrepreneurial phase. But I see a lot of people seeing it like a lottery ticket. And once they get inside of it, it's like they're introduced to this new part of who they are. It's like, oh my gosh, they said if I just talked to my family and friends that I would be rich, right? But it doesn't work that way. But no. And it's looking at the term network marketing. I mean, it's learning how to do those 2 skills, but being able to, I've got my own journey of how I had to uncondition some of the programming that I had received as a child. But I'm curious as to see what you would suggest for somebody that wants to be successful, but they just don't have that deep burning white flame that Napoleon Hill talks about. What would you tell that person?
Well, like a lot of things Dr. Hill talked about, most of us don't have many of them. And that's Dr. Hill and I used to laugh that Think and Grow Rich was sort of a wish book. This is the way you ought to think and the way you ought to operate and so on. But most of us don't. What I would do and have done is show people that they got far more talents than they think they do. I pulled a guy off a milk truck in Detroit, Michigan in front of the Pontchartrain Hotel one day, showing a class that you can recruit everywhere and anywhere. name was Tony Milano, pulled him off the truck. I'm quoting numbers. I'm not really sure, but I think he said he was making $500 or $600 a month working his tail off. And I said, well, if I paid your parking ticket for leaving the van there too long, and you came in and I showed you where you could make 5 or 10 times that amount, would you be interested? He said, yeah. Put down his milk carton, and in the hotel he went. And less than a year later, he was making over $300,000 a year in late 1960 dollars. And he didn't think he could sell. He didn't think he could do anything. But I isolated, what do you want in life? Are you and your wife living the life now that you had promised her that you would hope you'd be living? No. What's lacking? Well, I don't know, but among the many things is money. Fine. And I hadn't met Dr. Hill at that moment. I met him in 1967 when he came to work for me as a gift, hired by my boss. Apparently, that may have been an insult. You need help. Here's Dr. Hill. But what we did was we pinned it down. Dr. Hill says in Think and Grow Rich, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And I said to him one day over lunch, unless he's crazy. And his head jerked up. No one ever questioned Dr. Hill. I said, that doesn't make any sense. Insane asylums are filled with people who thought and believed and so on, but they're wrong because they're crazy. So he said, well, if I ever rewrite, this took several lunches, but eventually he said, okay, if I ever rewrite the book, I will put whatever the mind of man can conceive, blah, 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 space, unless he's crazy, or unless it's crazy. And then I said, and we started another series of lunches about how to set a goal. And conceiving it and believing it, I don't think is enough. So we worked, Dr. Hill and I worked on numerous napkins, and finally we came up with, to achieve a goal, it must be specific. Mm-hmm. Not I want to be rich, specific, right. Measurable. If it's money, that's easy to count, and attainable. And we quibbled about that a little bit because anything is attainable. Well, it's really not. There's a lot of things that aren't attainable. Mm-hmm. So whatever the mind man can conceive and believe and so on, unless he's crazy, so long as it's specific, measurable, and attainable. Now, once you pin that down with the Tony Milanos of the world as to how much money he wanted to make, I then suggest you make those goals daily. A few years ago, I decided I want to make $1 million a year, not counting real estate investments or stocks going up or down or anything, just cash, commissions, and profits. And I did my little math on it. I see it all over the place now. So it either caught on or other people figured out the same thing. It comes out to $2,739 a day and pocket change, 7 days a week. I couldn't remember the end pocket change. I just rounded it up to 2,800. My goal is, people say, what are you going to make this week? I haven't got a clue. But today, my goal is to make $2,800. And tomorrow morning when I get up, my goal is to make $2,800. Well, what if you made 56 yesterday? My goal is to make $2,800. What if you made nothing yesterday? My goal is to make $2,800. In stock, bonuses, and so on, I one day, after a little 10-city swing in another country, they awarded me with a percentage of the company and so on. I made 14, besides what they paid me, for 10 speeches and the books they bought and all. What they gave me that night, the last night I was there, was worth $14 million, plus what I'd been paid for everything. So I was talking to a friend later before we got on the plane. He says, wow, that's unbelievable. You don't have to work for 14 years. I said, no, tomorrow morning I have to make $2,800. Because see, that it keeps it right up under your nose. It's like a dog who wets on the carpet and you put his nose in, this is what we're talking about. So, I'm not mad in general. I'm mad at you and that puddle. So that's what the 2,800 does. You don't fool yourself. People say, I'm going to make $1 million this year. Well, come June 1st, when they've made 100,000, if they're lucky, they get discouraged. Well, I can't make it, so I'll reset my goal next January. And then they go through life. Everything is next January, till they're 65 or 70 or whatever and retired and or dead. So, but if you keep it right in front of you every day, and then how do you do that? Systems. You build success. Everybody knows what they should be doing. If I sat down 90% of your listeners with a legal pad say, what should you do tomorrow?
Right.
Not what do you want to do? What should you do? They would be able, with a little coaching, to write it down. I say, fine, now get yourself a calendar. I'd show them where I get mine and write that. I know the computer generation would do it differently. I like to write it down, right, and take my China mark, my India marker, and cross it out when it's done. Mm-hmm. So you write it down and you attack it. Ivy Lee, the great efficiency expert, I never knew him, but Earl Nightingale used to talk about him, called on the head of United States Steel or Bethlehem Steel or whoever it was, Schwab, I think. And he said he spent a day with him, and finally at the end of the day, Schwab said, okay, well, what have you got to teach me? And he says, I know exactly what you need. I want you to write down the 5 most important things you have to do tomorrow. Number in the order of importance. He did that. He said, fine, now go work on number 1 till it's done and pay no attention to anything else until it is done. And you'll develop a habit of getting it done. Well, I don't write 5 things down. Tomorrow there are 8 things above and beyond normal things, like check Facebook, clear my email, and so I don't write all that down. So 8 specific, I gotta do them tomorrow things. And I've developed the discipline, do you think you'll get them all done? Yeah, I've gotten them all done 365 days a year since probably got onto that system 40 some odd years ago. So it's really simple. Success is not an event. It's a procedure. It's a flow of one idea after another. I read something today. I hadn't seen it worded exactly that way, but if you want to get rich, look at all the things you do and don't do the things that don't make any money. I'm not talking about loving your wife or going to the Little League game with your kids. Right. Common sense. But right, we all do things that don't move us towards our goal. Quit doing that. Right. Ray Considine and Dr. Hill, independent, unbeknownst to each other, each told me several times a day, maybe 15 times a day, when you're doing something, stop and ask yourself, is this the most important thing I can be doing right now? And even with my system and my discipline, from time to time, it's not. Sometimes it's to avoid. Gigi and I went for a drive up through Apple Hill. It's a real nice area filled with apple growers right above our house, a little closer to Tahoe than we are. And we're driving around. She said, this is so nice up here during the week, not on a weekend and so on. This is just lovely. I'm so glad you thought of it. And we drove along in silence for a while. And she said, are you trying to get out of writing something? And I said, yeah. So even with my system, write is always written there because I ghostwrite other books, write sales scripts for people, all sorts of writing activities. And I hate writing until I get the first sentence in. Once I get the first sentence, I'm almost compulsive. I've got to get it done. I'm enjoying it and so on. But even though I know that, once I do the first sentence, I'll love the rest of it. I still hate writing the first sentence. I hate clearing the deck, sitting down, getting at the computer, and knowing I now have to produce part or all of a book. I don't write a book in one setting, but it's seating. But with all my, and that's the reason I have a system, because I would be driving around Apple Hill 7 days a week, listening to 1950s and 60s rock and roll, if I didn't have other things I had to do. Right. So I know exactly Jim Rohn used to tell that great story, about staying focused. He sits down with a salesperson. He says, how many people did you call on yesterday? And the salesperson says, well, the dog I was a little late getting up and the dog got out. And Jim Rohn said, whoa, let me show you something. And he turns his sheet around and he says, you see this little square they gave me? That's to put a number in. You're telling me a story. I want a number. How many people did you call on yesterday? And of course, the salesman had more of a story he wanted to tell because he didn't have a number. The number was 0. Could have left the square blank. So you just got to check yourself. You got to be your own checker and rewarder. I have a little list of things that I want. I've been through the yachts and the airplanes and all that. It's nothing like that. It's I want a new pair of slacks, or I remember one day it was, when you have a significant hit, then you get something off the list. And one day I had a significant hit. Somebody agreed in one phone call to, I think, 4 seminars. I made about $40,000 in the course of that phone call, plus sales once I got there. And I looked down at the list. It was a new package of white socks. That was next up on the list. So Gigi said, "You made $40,000 and you're going to get yourself a package of white socks?" I said, "Yeah, but there's some really good stuff farther down the list." But I give me my own pats on the head, because especially when you're in business for yourself, you can't count on somebody motivating you with a car or a trip or this or that. You got to establish the discipline, do the work, understand that it's day by day, grind it out. Not every day is exciting. I love going to a seminar and having people that, "Here he is, Benjamin Franklin Gay III," and they stand and roar. I just love that. I could stay in that moment for the rest of my life. Love it. But the way I got in front of that crowd was I looked at my calendar 6 months ago and ground it out by the numbers, day by day by day. Not exciting, but very rewarding. So you can make a lot of money without knowing how to speak. So.
Right. So, and I love what you said is that you hate writing that first sentence. And I think so many people, and I'm speaking to the choir as well on this, is that they look at these people that have achieved great things and they don't see that, like you're talking about, it's through the disciplines. It's through a great book that I read. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
I haven't read it, but I have it around here somewhere in a reading pile.
That book, great book. It really helped me understand how important the little incremental things are, because he's like, you change your life 1% every day. You're not going to change it all in one shot. And then at the course of 1 year, you haven't changed your life 365 degrees or percent. It's like exponentially. It talks about the power of compounding. It was a great book. So it's like, just read 10 pages of a book a day. You don't have to read the whole book. And doing those little disciplines, 10 pages of a book a day, listening to something, 15 minutes of audio, your environment. I mean, I love what you shared about what drove you was that you were raised at a certain conditioning, your comfort level, and then you got out of that, and then you wanted to have that back, because our environment is massively important in shaping, as you know, of shaping how we see things. And as you're sitting there talking, Ben, I was thinking, one of the areas, because I've been around car sales and things like that, and right now being around salespeople and things, is that it seems to be there's, and I don't know if I've only been in a few industries, but it just seems that people that have really high commissions or full commission jobs, there seems to be a lot of alcoholism and stuff like that in it. And I'm just curious on what your thoughts are on that, because I see that, and it's like, it's like you said, you got to be selling a great product. If you're selling something that is not aligned with your integrity, it's going to tear you apart inside.
Right.
And being an integrous person, telling people the truth and things like that. So I'm just curious, what do you think is the reason for such a high rate of alcoholism and drug addiction and stuff like that in sales?
Well, having worked in and around prisons for a total of 11 years, 5 years at San Quentin and 6 years at Lompoc, I've gotten to see the results of that lifestyle and talk to a lot of those people. Part of it is predisposition. Some people are born with it, but with that same predisposition comes sometimes the need to be loved and so on, and selling can provide that and so on. So part of it is it draws a certain person to it. Now, as far as selling, driving people to drinking, a lot of people don't handle the influx of money very well. New money, the nouveau riche. I had a friend one time who'd made a lot of money, much of it illegally. I met him. He was in one of my classes at Lompoc, and he was talking about. Keep in mind, he's at Lompoc now. He's operating. I think he was making $35 a month or something like that, picking up cigarette butts. And he was talking about this restaurant in Paris and so on. I said, Wes, I used to hate the nouveau riche, but you've made a new category I had never thought of. And he said, what's that? And I said, the formerly nouveau riche. you're talking about your days when you suddenly had some money, but you don't have any now, but you're still talking about those days. There's an innate thing in some people that drives them to. Now let's go back just to the core. Does selling cause alcoholism or whatever? Influx of money, yes, and so and so. But mainly it's you got to be careful who you run with. And there's, it's, if you don't want to be stepped on by elephants, don't walk around in the elephant herd.
Right.
In my case, I probably had a little predisposition to drink too much. My dad drank too much. He was a very successful guy, but when I picture him at home, there was a double bourbon in his hand all the time. I mean, I don't mean from Sunday morning on, but at night he enjoyed his double bourbons and so on. So I probably had a little predisposition myself to that. Right. What brought me up short was living the good life and the two martini. I didn't drink martinis, but the two whatever lunch, which frequently was 3. I'm Irish. 1 beer is too many. 3 is not enough. Right. So too many of the 2 or 3 drink lunches. And then if you drink at lunch, you might as well drink at dinner. And then in 1967, coming out of 67 or 68 maybe, coming out of Tiburon, California, there's a curve, and as you're going over to the Highway 101, and I got fascinated, instead of paying attention to the curve, watching the flashing lights of a police car. He was giving somebody a ticket, and I hit the guardrail and then went all the way around the curve like I was supposed to while shearing off the front of my car. And as we discovered when we got to the police station, as the nice police officer said, he said, Mr. Gay, they knew me. I'd given a lot of money to the Police Athletic League. I was active in the community and so on. He said, Mr. Gay, I'm not surprised that you hit the guardrail. I'm surprised you could find your car when you left the bar in Tiburon because of your blood count. Wow. And I had a friend in the back seat, equally drunk. That's the reason he was in the back seat. But he could, let's say it wasn't a guardrail and a funny story. Let's say I really hit something. Mm-hmm. I could have killed him, spent the rest of my life in prison. I have children of a friend of mine who now are serving the rest of their lives in prison because they killed 5 people. I think they were on drugs, but the concept's the same. 5 people on drugs. So my life could have come to an end that night, literally and physically, or spending the rest of my life in prison. As it turned out, I paid a $300 fine. And because I knew the right attorneys, my case was not heard on the day when they hear drunk driving cases. So the drunk driving reporter wasn't there when I did mine. I just slipped in, slipped out, paid my $300. And my attorney, same guy who was the defense attorney for Carol Chessman, who was put to death at San Quentin, the red light bandit, my attorney took me aside. He said, here's what I do when I've had too much to drink. And he gets out a bottle of Tips. You put it on your tongue and it cleans up your breath, I guess. He said, that way they can't tell you've been drinking. I said, well, they could have been told I was drinking. But by the way I was conducting myself, Tips wouldn't have saved me. But I appreciate the tip about the tips, but I got a better idea. And I didn't have another drink of any kind for 10 years. Wow. And when I returned to the battlefield, it was with Bud Light. And we have a limit on that. I don't probably have a limit, but Gigi does. As I order my 3rd one, she'll say, that's number 3, or as we call it, your last one. So she didn't know me in those days, but she heard all the stories. Right, so it goes back to discipline. Do you want to be successful, or do you want to be the broken down drunk with a big fat nose with the red veins in it, standing on a used car lot in a cheap sport coat 25 years from now? Because that's what comes next, or dead. Right. Or dead.
Right. Yeah, and I had a near fatal car accident when I was 19. Results me drinking stuff, and I really take that very sensitive of where, just like you're saying, that one moment it could be all over, and
right.
The whole discipline thing. So how do you? Because you teach seminars, you teach really at a high level and teaching salespeople and that. How do you do anything with them to help? Because to me, everything we do in life is sales. Everything. I mean,
sure.
How you conduct yourself with your significant other, to raising kids, to whatever. It's all about selling. How do you get people to? Because one of the things I just love about you is that there's just this proud. I mean, you're like honored because you got to sell as long as you've been able to sell, and it's just like you're a professional salesperson, and you embrace that and wear it and everything proudly. I mean, it's an honor for you to do that. Is there any techniques that you do that help people understand the honor of selling? I mean, what it really means to be able to serve somebody, find out what their wants and needs are, and then their affords, and then being able to meet that. But how do you get people to release this whole persona of selling as slimy and manipulative? And do you do anything like that in your seminars or trainings?
Well, yes, and part of it goes back to what we've already discussed. I encourage them to sell quality products. There's a joy. I don't care if you're excited about selling or not. If you deliver a quality product or service to someone and you see the look on their face and the joy and so on that it brings when you've done it honestly and ethically, it's like a drug. You know, reward the behavior you want to see repeated, ignore the behavior you don't. You get to reward yourself with that. And I just think that's crucial. It's almost like I guess I'm like the heroin dealer. Here, just take a little taste or puff or whatever you do with heroin. I don't know. But anyway, just give it a try. You know, let's just work hard enough to get a $10,000 commission check for one act. Something you did, you know, let's work, or let's have your first $10,000 month. That would put you, if you kept that up, that would put you above the average by a long shot. Let's get you hooked on it. In public speaking, people, number one, psychological fear. The fear goes away when they get their first standing ovation. One of our adopted sons, well, our only adopted son, but is a wonderful gentleman I met at Lompoc. And he was an 18-year-old drug dealer, had already managed to get himself into federal prison. And his plan, I was told, I heard him one day speak, and I said, that guy's got a great voice. He wasn't in front of a room. He was just talking to some people. A great voice. And another friend of mine said, yeah, and here's the shame. You know what his goal is? And I said, no, what's his goal? And he said to get out, stick up somebody, get $300 to finance his way back into the drug business. I said, you got to be kidding me. No, and he wasn't a high school graduate or anything. So long story short, I sort of took him under my wing and put him in awkward situations. He said he'd come to the public speaking class as long as I didn't have him get up and speak. I said, not a problem. So as soon as he walked in, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce a new member to you. Lamont Bowen's going to talk to you for 5 minutes. Lamont, get up here. And he looked at me, hands shaking. But he knocked him dead for 5 minutes and got a standing ovation. He didn't have much content to talk about yet, didn't have much inventory, but he was better in that short period of time than Martin Luther King Jr. was in anything but I Have a Dream speech. Mm-hmm. I mean, he just knocked them on their rear ends, and they stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Into the meeting, they're all going back their separate ways. And he came over to me and said, now, when do I get to speak again? He liked that standing ovation stuff. Yeah, and I said, well, not only is it just speaking, you got to have something to talk about. So you're going to have to start reading. You're going to have to start doing this and that and that. Fast forward, he graduated from Sacramento State Law School, San Francisco State Law School, second in his class 7 years ago. I just signed a letter of endorsement. He's been a practicing attorney now for 7-8 years, but I just got another one to fill out to get him admitted to the Washington, D.C. bar, which he's since accomplished. So he's licensed to practice in numerous states because the firm he's in sends him places. So just a license doesn't do. You got to have a license here, a license there, and so on. And there's an 18-year-old black drug dealer with no high school education. But I got him hooked on, in that case, recognition and praise, and then money and another guy that was there with him remains a good friend. They are doing apartment deals together and low income housing to help people who need a little lift in life and so on. And I just couldn't be prouder of them. And when I think back, all right, what happened? I got him I put him in a position to get a standing ovation, and then showed him the benefits of operating in a different sphere.
Right.
And so you just give them a taste. Most people will take it and go. In fact, I can't think of anybody who hasn't, if you can get them to start.
Right.
You know, many people will say, I'll call you tomorrow. I'll get back to you. And I know how that comes out. That's Latin for you will never see me again.
Right. Well, and the thing that I found interesting you sharing that story is that you didn't buy into what he thought he needed to do. And you just throw him in. You just throw him in the pulpit and just say, just do it. And now look at where he's at as a result of you not believing what he thought he needed to do. I'm just curious: do you consider yourself an extrovert or an introvert?
Funny you should ask that. I'm asked that frequently. I think I've become an extrovert, except when I'm up in the suite getting ready to go downstairs to speak. Mm-hmm. As soon as I'm in the room amongst them shaking hands, I'm fine. And on stage, I am very comfortable. But getting ready to go down and meet a bunch of people I don't know and who may not like me, it's hard to believe, but there actually are people on the planet who don't like Ben Gay. I don't get it, but there are some. Yeah. So that little moment reminds me that I was at least an introvert, and the Ben Gay, that people say is a persona I've developed to get over shyness when I was young. At my heaviest, till I reached 30 years old, and it wasn't a problem. But at my heaviest, I was 142 pounds growing up and into adulthood. Therefore, you're not a football player. Right. I'm 5'10" and not terribly coordinated, so you're not a basketball player. There's all sorts of things I wasn't and wasn't going to be that are normally the easy ways to date the homecoming queen or the head cheerleader or what have you. I didn't have any of those going for me. So I had to develop a personality. I was elected wittiest in my high school senior class. Mother and Dad said, but it's not reflected in your grades. I said, they don't have a grade for wittiest. Right. He said, well, how about Latin? D. And I said, she gave me a D because she won't see me back next year. She figured, move him on.
Right.
So part of it is developed, but I really enjoy pleasing people. When I go into a restaurant, I've alluded to it earlier, I go in not to eat. If I just wanted to eat, I could have stayed home or gone to McDonald's or something. I go in looking to make new friends. And I don't mean table hopping, but we usually wind up talking to people within a few feet of us because we're kidding them about their kids or telling them how much, if they got a dog outside on the patio, how much we like the dog or what have you. But to me, it's almost a contest. How many people can I make feel good about themselves? Because I'll find, I don't care. I could find something nice to say about Quasimodo. You don't bend over much. I don't know exactly what I'd work with, but I would find a way. And Gigi and I I'm guessing there are 10 restaurants in town we go to. I'm told there's 200 around here, but they must be counting every coffee shop and McDonald's and so on. But there's 10, 15 restaurants we go to on a semi-regular basis. The waiters and waitresses tend to scramble to see who gets to take care of us. Because we make them feel good. We call them our Main Street kids. Most of the restaurants are on Main Street in Placerville. We call them our Main Street kids. And Gigi and I, we've been together 20 some odd years. We're on about our third generation. You sort of forget they go away gradually. They grow up, go to college, get married, live in Portland or something. But our Main Street kids, I'm not saying this egotistically, love us because first we loved them and made it abundantly clear, and we listened to their stories. Gigi, when she worked at a grocery store years ago in Los Angeles, she's a Placerville girl, but she went away like they all do for a year or two or three or whatever. used to talk to this older couple who came in, and they were so nice to her, and they asked about her dating and what kind of donuts were good and so on. Just made her feel like $1 million. And after she talked to him several times, I'm afraid to ask her how many because the punchline of the story is funny, she finally said to him, "What do you do?" Well, it turned out this older couple trying to make Gigi feel good, and they did, and she loved them, were Will and Ariel Durant, who wrote, the history of civilization and the history of this and so on. And Gigi was their mental break. They got tired of writing. They lived nearby, and they would come down, and Gigi was their mental break. And they enjoyed making her feel good. And she, to this day, they're gone, to this day, worships them. And she got each of their books, but was too shy to ask them to sign them. That could be my retirement program right there. Yeah. Right. But it's fun to make people feel good. It's an old saying. I don't know who came up with it or whatever, but everybody has a sign around their neck. If you look closely enough, you'll see it. It says, "Make me feel good about myself." Mm-hmm. Every book I've ever read and every person I've ever known who achieved a degree of greatness, somewhere it is said about them, good or bad. You don't have to like the person we're talking about, but good or bad, when I was with him or her, I felt as if I were the most important person on earth. Right. Or I felt as if I were the only person on earth. That's a common denominator of the vast majority of people who've really made something in their lives. There's only so many things you can make. You got to get other people to help you. And the way you get them to help you is praise them and make them feel good about themselves and give them some guidance and so on. That's your job. I consider it literally my job every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I've been thinking about this, what's a great question that I could ask that I want to take away personally for me and from Ben Gay. So you've been around a while, and you've seen lots and lots of things, and you've gone through lots and lots of experiences. What would Ben Gay today tell the Ben Gay that was a teenager that wasn't sure what he was going to do with his life? What would you tell that Ben Gay today?
I would tell him, and I've told myself many times, get serious sooner. Life was a lark. I had a personality, and I thought selling was a handshake, pair of shine shoes, and a smile like Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman. I thought that was it. I didn't learn the scripts. I didn't come early. I didn't stay late. I didn't, all the things I preach now, I didn't do in those early days. And, say, well, you built a lawn mowing business where you were making more than most of the adults in your neighborhood. Mm-hmm. True. But I did it to get out of manual labor. First, I was told to mow lawns and rather quickly figured out that was not going to be my specialty. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine an older gentleman, talked me into, for not a whole lot of money, but it seemed a lot of money at the time, to hot tar and gravel the roof of a restaurant he owned in Atlanta in July. So those two experiences taught me rather quickly physical labor was not for me. So once I made that decision, and I made that in my I think I was 14 when I was hot mopping that roof. Once I figured out I wasn't going to do that, then I should have gotten real serious real quick about something else instead of gliding into selling with just smile and then laughing. I'd have gotten serious. I would have invested more of my money in those early days than I did. I had to play catch up by the time I realized I went through a little period where the money wasn't still coming in. And I thought, that never crossed my mind. I thought the money would always come in, and suddenly it wasn't. And we were discussing things like budget. I'd never been on a budget. That wasn't in my vocabulary. So I would have invested differently. I would have had a few less boats and a few less yachts. I see people now, they make a little money. I'm gonna get a boat and go like, whoa, there's a better way to do that. I've learned the use of things. We don't do it anymore, but up at Tahoe, there used to be a 51-footer, I think it was, called the Empress. and we threw parties on it and so on. And I leased it, complete with the captain. I was in the Coast Guard, but I wanted to entertain people, not steer a boat. We leased it with a captain once a month in the boating season, which means about 4 times a year. So now I'm floating. I'd had the company Royal We had a 110-foot fantail. It looked like President Truman's yacht, the Sequoia. We had a 50-footer, I think, tied up behind the office. I think we had 42 airplanes, the only flying B-29 in the world at the time. F-86 fighter jet, planes. And if I can look back over the stuff that money got spent on, either mine, the company money, or money I had to make, even if it was for the owner of the company. At first, I had to make it for him to spend it. I look back over that, millions of dollars got left on the table or in the pockets of other people. Wouldn't do any of that, none of it. You want to float around on a yacht and feel important, go up to Tahoe and charter the Empress.
Right.
And then float around on somebody else's boat, and then you throw the lines to the dockhand and you're done.
Right.
You're not worried about insurance or cleaning it up or a cracked hull or, whatever. You're done. Right. So use of things would really be important. Right. Pretty much, I don't have a whole lot I'm terribly ashamed of, but a few $1 million slipped through my hands that should be in my pocket today.
Right. So what does the next 10 years look like for you?
Funny you should ask. 10 years at my age is a hope. It's not an absolute. I'm 75 this year. And
Look at me, by the way. I'm not just, wow.
So, whatever. I had lunch one day with a friend of mine who wanted to be a client, and we were too close of friends, and I knew too much about him to be a client. So I said, we'll have a lunch, but we're not going to have you sending me checks. I don't want to screw up a good friendship. And I said, so what do you want to know? And he's my age. And this was 5 years ago. He said, well, first of all, I don't want any 10-year plans. And I thought, what does that mean? And I get it. He wants to be retired or will be dead. Right. So he didn't want any 10-year plans. Right. But so I was slowing down. Gigi took me down from over 300 speeches a year to 24. I raised my fees, but no more than 3 in 1 month and so on, usually 2 in a month. And stuff like that. No local clients. That's how come nobody here knows who I am or cares. And so I've made those adjustments. But then an opportunity came along the other day, a few months ago now. And Gigi said she heard me talking about it. She heard my excitement rising and so on. And she said, Ben, I know you want to. Why don't you sprint to the finish? In other words, she untethered me. If the right situation came along, go for it. And the right situation appears to be a program that's being put together called The Last Protege. And it's the teachings of Napoleon Hill and how I put them to use because I am the last protege. He worked for and with me till the day he died, the last 2.5 years of his life. So they're building this whole program around my relationship with Dr. Hill. And if your viewers want to, I got nothing invested in this. I haven't made a dime yet. I plan to. But if they want to, they can go to the thelastprotege.com, and all you'll see is The Last Protege with Napoleon Hill. But there's a place to put in your first name and email address. They don't even want your whole name, just your first name and email address. And then you'll be automatically kept up to date as the program unfolds starting September, October of next year. Of this year, September, October. And there'll be webinars, live seminars, workshops, all sorts of things, all sorts of powerful people we're recruiting to work along with us. But that probably is going to be, and the closers continues, but all I have to do is sell the closers, answer the phone or check my emails or go to the website. That's not a great challenge anymore. It's been the best selling, most powerful, most popular book on selling and closing for almost 40 years. Wow. So there some things that just don't take my involvement. They just happened because I did the hard pedaling years ago. But this one is brand new, not planned, and I may wind up doing a whole bunch of it. And then PSI World, which was a spinoff of one of my seminar companies, Leadership Dynamics and Mind Dynamics, is for sale up at the ranch that we bought and built the big house on. They've been teaching PSI World seminars up there for years. A group I'm part of is right on the verge of buying the seminar company and the property and the big house, sort of having homecoming. I get to go back. Bill Patrick was killed in a plane crash up there, so I'm the last protege from that crowd too. I was always the youngest this, the youngest this, the youngest this. Now people say, "You're so grandfatherly." I just love that. And you're so, and I want to scream at them. I do more things in an average day than most 30-year-old successful people do. Right. After a while, people just take it for granted. So the last protege is the answer to your question, and maybe PSI World again.
Great. I love it. And I'll definitely be checking that out. And anybody watching this, I encourage you to check it out. And then again, we've got the art and science of resort sales. We've got sell and closing power. Which one was it?